I often hear people talk about reframing or rephrasing what they're experiencing, which would traditionally be described as anxiety, and repackaging or remanufacturing that and putting it into excitement. Because you think about it, what is the difference? I would say that stress or anxiety is unwelcome feelings of excitement or being flurried or not feeling yourself or relaxed. Certainly, I would characterize all three of those as being the opposite of relaxed. But in the case of excitement, you have a feeling that people pay money for. It's the feeling that you get when you're in line at Disneyland or Disney World, or when you're about to go to the prom, or when you're going to do something that you've been looking forward to, playing a round of golf with friends or going to lunch with, your girlfriends or whomever you're with. That's an experience that you savor, you look forward to, and really you focus your life on getting to. It's like, why do we work? Well, so that we can trade off difficult situations for positive situations or ultimately fulfilling situations. You always hear about business executives talk about, if you like what you do, you'll never work another day in your life. And they're really right. You'll have stressful aspects of your job, but as a totality, if you enjoy what you do and you can keep the stress relatively low and you rename or you position the anxiety that you feel or stress as excitement for a music launch or for a speech or something that brings you closer to what you love, then that's a positive. And as you get more and more experienced, then it becomes less and less of even the levels that you might have to navigate. So let's say when someone like Bill Clinton does a speech, is he nervous? Well, he wants it to go well, but it's something he's done so many times. It's just like Tiger Woods going to the tee, or an experienced baseball player going to the plate in front of 20,000 people and millions at home. They know that they're feeling a lot of pressure. And in the case of golf, you could have one bad swing and it completely derails the round. And what was lining up to be an appearance worth millions of dollars and sponsorships, you could win the tournament, and it falls apart. Well, there's numerous examples of that happening on the last hole. John Van de Velde at the British Open 20 years ago, or really any number of different situations where we see the people that we respect and admire that fall apart. And in many ways, that humanizes them and that gains them more fans in terms of how they confront this uncomfortableness. So when you're, let's say, doing a presentation, almost all of us in the business field are selling in one form or another. And what this means is that we have to be comfortable one-on-one and in front of a group. We have experience talking to people one-on-one all the time, whether it be with our spouses, significant others, whoever we're dating, our siblings, parents. This is something that we have well entrenched in who we are. And to be able to have difficult conversations with people that are one-on-one, sometimes those could be the most nerve-wracking. You may be fearful. I think most people are fearful about getting in front of a crowd. A lot of times the most difficult conversations we have, such as asking for a raise from a boss, could be even more stress-inducing than going and giving a presentation in front of 100 strangers. And really, when you think about it, it's not the actual presentation that you're stressed about. Very often it's the fear of being perceived to be unintelligent or incompetent, or to be embarrassed, or to put your foot in your mouth to such a degree that you may lose your job, even though you know that that's very unlikely to be the case if you have, a track record of being able to do these types of things. It's not like a whole bunch of words are going to pop out of your mouth without your control that are going to land your job in jeopardy. And you may put pressure on yourself that's unnecessary. So certainly it could be the case that if you don't land this deal and you flew to Atlanta to pitch, Boeing or some major multinational and you're a part of the sales organization, and if this one sale doesn't go through, then you may get fired. Well, that could be a very real concern that is a fact of life. I mean, when you think about it, who also are all commission? Real estate agents. There's millions of people that they need to get done what they're going to do. And if you hyper focus on one specific event, then yes, that will be stressful. And that myopic looking at that one event provides you undue stress. And despite what you might think for people, oh, I perform best under pressure, or I do the best, the reality is the majority of people don't. You're at your best because when you're under the gun, you have no choice but to focus. And the fact that you say, oh, I'm good under pressure, it's like, no, you're good, but you are good when you're focused. You don't have to be in the last 4 hours before presentation's due or really up against the wall. All those feelings of like, oh my gosh, I need to get this done, inhibit parts of the brain that are related to creativity and feeling relaxed and the free flow of information that your brain needs in a non-stressed state to be able to perform at peak function. They have some really talented comedians like Conan O'Brien or Andy Richter that say that when they do improv, they put in thousands of hours into doing it and doing it well. But that sometimes they'll get into a situation, they'll have the other person saying something, and they'll land a joke that's so funny and timely and well timed, and the audience will just fall apart laughing, and they'll say, I don't know where that came from. And what it really came from is those hours of practice, all that time put in to be able to feel the room, the situation, and have your comedy chops be where they need to be able to deliver in a big way on a big stage. That's not being good under pressure. That's just being good when you're focused. I feel like the only people that are good under pressure are ones that have the goal firmly affixed in their mind. So they may say, if I do action X, I'm looking forward to the feeling of winning the World Series. I remember going to a Padre game with Tony Gwynn, and Tony Gwynn was last at bat. It was like the bottom of the ninth and 2 outs. He had to do something or the game was over. So of course, what does he do? Hits a grand slam. On like the third, what would have been the third strike, he just went all out. And obviously he would have probably for his stress sake liked to have hit the first ball out of the park, but he was feeling out the batter and getting kind of ready. And there were two good swings at it that either one of them were so forceful they could have crushed the ball out of the ballpark, as the third one eventually did. So it's the combination of preparedness and being able to pull from that part of your brain when you're on the biggest stage. I mean, when you're seeing the debates for whatever your local political organization is, whether for mayor or city council, these are people that are operating largely off the top of their head. And a lot of times they're doing the worst out of all their practice sessions. Why? Because you're under the gun, you're stressed. And you'll hear political operatives that'll say, oh, person X did so well. I heard there's one politician out of Texas, I think it was the governor, Rick Perry. He was a really good, apparently, debating partner. And I think the former president used him as someone to debate against for his own national political debates. But when it came down to it, I think he was rattling off like step 1, step 2, step 3, and like forgot one of the steps along the way. And for someone that's good at debating, good off the top of their head, and then a consummate politician, obviously he'd be able to do this upside down and sideways in a situation that was not so stress inducing. So he was already feeling a lot of stress that he had to negotiate with better entrenched politicians. And he was coming in and trying to really wow the crowd. So there's added pressure there, not only to be yourself, but to be impressive to people that really don't know you. So I think it's fairly clear that people don't perform their best under pressure. It's when they're best prepared. So stress is something that you have to deal with on a daily basis a lot of times, unless you're on vacation. Those have their own micro stresses, but it's being able to compartmentalize that amount of stress that you have, recognize that it's part of what you do, and channel into excitement. I know for some people that do national speaking tours, that when they get on stage, they are so excited because all of their lives, they've been pushing for this type of media exposure. You know, if you go to Hollywood, I remember going to an event at Warner Brothers Studios, and we were in an Italian restaurant, and I was eating some lasagna, which was quite good, although it burned my tongue for the first couple of bites. And they had actors there, they were passing out leaflets for the hope that you, because you were close to or going to an event at the studios, that you might have like an uncle or a cousin that would be able to give them an interview or a shot. So in these situations, yes, they'll be stressed, but they'll also be excited to get this opportunity. So when people hit the main stage, they are so excited to be up there, to be getting the exposure that they want, to have their careers go the way they've been envisioned and dreamed. I know I do some interviewing for some university teaching that I do, and there's a regional conference that people hit the main stage in front of several hundred people. And they have a smaller stage where, you know, people go to test things out, maybe engineers, and they're not as polished to be in terms of their speaking abilities. And you'll see many of them kind of slink. And even though they're talking about hugely important and impressive projects, and they know these luminaries in the field and have sat down, they're not the most loquacious with this information, and it's having to be dragged out of them by interviewers that know of their standing in the community and know what they have experienced and what they have done. And it's impressive. So many of these engineers, they're not excited about the prospect of going on stage, even though it'll reflect well on their company, it will reflect well on themselves, certainly professionally, but they're feeling this stress in that I don't want to go up there and get this done, even though other people will be impressed by this. And I can literally just read off my resume or talk about my experiences and not have to remember much off the top of my head. I don't have to be doing a song and dance show. I can just talk like I would one-on-one at a dinner party, and you would wow the other person over and bowl them over with your experiences. And these people are so good at not having arrogance you'll see on the main stage, or, you know, these types of off-putting speaker mannerisms that will sour someone to a speaker. But there again, it's so deeply entrenched, the fear of public speaking or the fear of being judged, that people are just not going to do it. So you contrast that with people on the main stage. And on the main stage, very often, there are people that are really polished. And, you know, at this conference, there are marketing people up there. There are people that have spent 10 years knowing the power of marketing and being visible and living their life to the old PR adage that visibility is credibility. So they're ready to rock and roll. And they're nervous, yes, but they're also very focused and excited. And you can tell the excitement. They're not jumping up and down off the stage like Steve Ballmer might. They're not super expressive about how they're feeling. They're playing it cool, but they're playing it in a Mark Cuban type of cool, where you can see through his eyes, like really electric when he's in front of people. And really like on fire about what he does and to talk about it, and not just to like phone in a shill, as they say, to phone in like, oh, come visit my website. Happy to be in front of you. Our company is growing at 23% a quarter, and we just raised a new venture fund. No one wants to hear that. I mean, if people wanted to hear off of your CV or off of a press release, they would just go to whatever their favorite news publication is and, read the text. They want something lively, but something real. I did Toastmasters for a few years, and I've heard that the best type and most well-received speech are ones that are done as an educated friend. So what does that mean? Not someone that's like a professorial, pontificating, talking, windbag. I learned a few months ago that Chicago was in the wake of the 1896, I think, World's Fair. A New York writer wrote that Chicago was the Windy City, and not because it was off the lake. It was because there's so many hot windbags of politicians that are, full of hot air. No one wants that. One of the practices that I like to do when I'm trying to hone a pitch is I'll think about going to a dinner party with family, but extended family, people that you see around the holidays. And it'll be like, oh, what are you up to? What interesting projects are you doing? And it's like, you're not going to give them a 45-minute diatribe. You're going to give them, well, we're doing X. It's exciting because of X. And then what are you up to? So you get maybe 8 sentences, 6 sentences. So you have to be careful with your words. And when you're on a stage, you'll get more time than that. But at this conference, most of the main stage speakers will get 10 minutes total. So they have to hit their main points and then deliver that final stamp. And then boom, they're done. So I think when it comes down to it, that these engineers can be some of the best speakers because they're hitting people with what they need to hear. And if they can be clear that they don't want to get caught up in the weeds, then they can be the best of both worlds. You have people that want to listen to Lex Friedman 3.5-hour interview because they know that it's two intelligent people that are questioning each other about things. So if you had, Lex interview Cal Newport, which is a really good interview, where they're both guys from MIT, they're both deeply knowledgeable about computer science and AI. So when they go back and forth, they speak the same language of tech. And you're interested not in someone like going down the list of, let me read off the questions, but let me read a question to you based on what you've been telling me. So active listening followed by a well-reasoned response that leads to another question. And the best interviewers, certainly like Lex does, will make the other person the star and not sort of pontificate and get into like, well, here's what I think. Or one of the habits that I'll see some podcasters do is they'll say, here's your question. Do you have a question for me on this subject? And that's kind of like a groan. It's a self-congratulatory way of inviting someone on the show and really taking away their thunder at the end of it. So there's a way to do that that's elegant and sophisticated. But I think just based on the intelligence of the questions that you're asking, you can get a good sense of, is this person well-versed in the space, or do they know what they're talking about? This isn't like Jeopardy, we're just reading the questions. And even in that context, people thought that Alex Trebek was a world-class genius and he was amazing what he did, but really he was asking questions and he was really good with pronunciations and really practiced, and that came across. But I think that people can see through when you're doing an interview and the interviewer on the other side doesn't know what they're talking about and they're completely clueless. So the need to bring the focus back to yourself is not really that much of an importance. So when it comes to the issue, separating excitement versus anxiety and stress, I would take what you're feeling and try to compartmentalize it. and I would say, I'm feeling X. So I'm feeling nervous because I have to present in front of the department. I know that this person doesn't like me. I know that this person said that I shouldn't get a raise. I know that this person wants my job. And in my mind, these people were going to want me to fail. That type of framing will contribute exactly to what you do not want to have happen, which is you'll feed into what they want. I would imagine that you want to combat that, and being the competitive person that you are, you would want to excel. So certainly the worst thing that you could do from their vantage point and the best from your vantage point would be to really kill it. And I know someone that does a lot of speaking, and he says he gets excited and giddy almost when he thinks about these people that are jealous of him writhing around in a chair when they hear how well he's doing on stage and him delivering a salient point that washes over a crowd and is really impressive. So what you need to do is to take a hold of that competitive spirit that you have and grasp onto that and say, I feel this way. Let me materialize this feeling of excitement and really kill it on stage. There's also the other thing about contextualizing how you feel. If you're anxious in front of a crowd, 100% of other people are too. I mean, if you're not nervous, then you either don't care or you have 50 years of experience in doing a particular activity and you're so well versed at it. But, if you're just getting started with something, or you're a normal human that has a pulse and you're subject to the ordinary human emotions, you're going to be feeling these things. So you might say, yes, I'm feeling stressed, but very likely I'm feeling the same stress everyone else is feeling. And other people will buckle and other people will fall apart. That leads the way people that don't fall apart to get more opportunities. When you're casting a movie, one of the first things that a director will say is, can they handle the pressure performing in front of a live studio audience? Or what people are seasoned on Broadway that won't crack under the pressure and will be able to recollect themselves and stay composed in that situation. If you can't, you're in the extreme minority. I remember I saw a play in Washington, D.C. It was after some fire drill. So it was pretty disarming because it was at a time when you didn't know what was going on in D.C. There was still kind of security concerns. And so we all got whisked out and we got whisked back in the middle of the scene. And one of the performers of the Christmas Carol, they had to start the entire play from right where she started. And you could tell, like, when they opened the curtain, the look on in her eyes was like, oh man, I remember this frontwards and backwards, but when we start from the second act or the third act, and there was like 5 seconds of pause, and about 3 of those seconds in her eyes was just panic. But then you could see that her fear got washed away by her calming herself down and like, okay, I've done 10,000s of these shows. What is it? 8 times a week. So it's like twice on Sundays. And, so this. So it's that being able to tell yourself that I've got this content. I know what to do in this situation and I could deliver. And then she did. She recollected herself and delivered the rest of her part beautifully. And by the end, no one really even remembered it. Even my wife was like, oh yeah, I guess I do remember that. But if she'd just been continually quiet and had to, leave the show or freaked out or, there's consequences for that. But rather than focus on those consequences, they're like, oh man, I went to Juilliard and I want to go on Broadway and I'm working my way up through the major metro markets. And if this happens, then this would be terrible. And I told my friends I want to do this and it would be on YouTube. You can catastrophize just about any situation, and certainly one in front of people, but having that confidence, whether or not it's organic, fake it till you make it, and being able to just go up there and make it happen is the true mark of a professional and is in the minority. Can you do it when the pressure's on? And if you're well practiced at it, the answer is resoundingly yes. And as long as you're in good health, that you should be able to take the anxiety that you feel, the stress that you feel, and morph it into an excitement and positive energy that you can have make you into the type of speaker or salesperson that hits all your numbers and your marks. So I always hear that it takes 3 weeks to make a habit stick, but at the same time, in any area of your life, it's going to take practice. So getting good in front of people, practicing the repetitions and being able to be on it always is just the residue of hard work. If you do Toastmasters, which I recommend, going in there and doing a table topics, which is where people will write down your ands or uhs or filler words of any variety, is an extremely unnerving experience, but necessary to be able to polish up your speaking. And it's really uncomfortable to get into the middle of a speech, realizing and looking down and saying like, oh man, there's 15 little marks on that piece of paper. And this isn't going well. Will there be 30 by the time I'm done, and feeling like you're floundering? Better that you flounder in that environment in front of strangers when you're trying to get better and everyone's getting better. And there are people there, I guarantee you, that are worse than you if you're in a big group, than in front of your friends and family at a wedding or doing a toast. So it definitely is in your best interest to take that anxiety and put a positive spin on it, because you're going to get a lot more mileage out of that. It's going to dramatically put you ahead of the game. Thanks for checking out Stress Show.